In this episode, we're going to create an application running for both iOS and Android. And you may wonder, oh, are we going to use Kotlin multiplatform? Flutter? Or even that native framework? No, nothing like that. This is Swift and Tips, and here we use Swift. Recently, Apple showed us that they are working on making Swift compatible with Android. This is another great news for making Swift cross-platform. For that, we're gonna use a Swift framework capable to make your Swift code running on those platforms. We are talking about Skip.tools framework. I'm gonna explore the installation process, dependencies, limitations, and way more. This is gonna be interesting. Let's get started. Before starting, let me tell you the system requirements if you want to run Skip on your machine. You need to run Xcode 16.3 and above, Android Studio 2025, and Homebrew installed. Alright, let's get started. Okay, the first thing we need to do is, of course, installing Skip. And for that, I will follow the instructions that are in the description, and we're gonna use the following command, installing it from Homebrew. This process will take a few minutes, so be right back in a moment.
A few moments later.
Okay, now that Skip is installed, it's time to run the following command, skip checkup. This one will tell you if everything you need, all the dependencies required for Skip, are ready to go. Let's run it and see what happens. Okay, for some reason, in my case, I'm getting a problem with the Xcode. Probably because I have Xcode 26 and I need to do something about it. Let me double check that.
2 hours later.
Okay, my problem was that nothing was selected under command line tools, and I had to select manually Xcode 26 beta, which is the version I'm using right now. If that's your case, you should just select a particular command line tool and you will be good to go. My case was nothing was selected, and I'm trying to show you as much error as possible just in case you got the same problems like me. Okay, let's rerun the checkup command again. Okay, in this case is moving on. I'm getting a problem with Android Studio. Yep, makes sense, because I have installed Android Studio. This is one of the requirements from Skip. You should have Xcode, of course, but also Android Studio. Even if you're not using Kotlin, you should have it, because Android Studio contains the device manager to run emulators, and it is required for you to keep open an Android emulator every single time you use Skip and build your application. Okay, let's install Android Studio. Okay, in my case, I'm going to install Android Studio from Homebrew. You can download it manually, but I think this is the fastest way to do it. Let's get back to you once this installation is done. Okay, here we are in Android Studio. We're gonna press next and we're gonna select the standard installation. We're gonna click next again, and we need to accept the terms and conditions here. This is a very important step. It's actually another requirement from Skip.tools that you should accept both terms and conditions. Otherwise, you're not able to run any of the Android emulators and of course not running Skip. Let's proceed in accepting, and you should be good to go. From this point, you should just click finish and everything will be downloaded for you. Let's now get back to you once all the setup is done. Now, before moving on, you might notice this line in the middle of the checkup, which is a skip license that will expire on July 16th. Yes, technically, this is not a free tool. Let me explain you a little bit about the pricing of Skip. There are basically 3 tiers of pricing. The first one is for indies. If you are just one guy or two and you're not making more than $30,000 per year, you're good to go using the free option. However, you're pretty limited to just making one closed source app and you're using Skip Lite. I'm going to explain what is that in a bit. The second option for small businesses is $30 per month. And now you got access to Skip.tools, which is another set of tools that are not provided in this Skip Lite. You have 5 closed source apps available, and you should not make more than $250K per year. Now, if this is not good for you either, you have the professional, which is $99 per month, and you have also access to Skip.tools and unlimited apps, and basically any kind of organization can fit here. Now, what is the difference between Skip Lite and Skip.tools? In simple words, Skip Lite, instead of compiling your code, it is actually transforming your Swift code into Kotlin code. And then that Kotlin code is compiled natively in Android. In contrast, Skip.tools is providing a custom Swift compiler, and that compiler is compiling their application with Swift code into iOS and Android. Let's make that statement really clear, because in my experience, depending on what you choose, the same code base will not work in one way or another. You will see that at the end of the video. But the thing is that one is a Swift compiler that is making everything for you, and the other is just transpiling whatever you write in Swift and transforming it into Kotlin. There are pros and cons of both approaches. But for example, Skip Lite is basically doubling the app size because it needs the double of files to make it work. In contrast, Skip.tools is a little bit lighter, but is slower because it's compiling both applications at the same time. So you can read the full list, but I will say that the pros of one tool is the cons of the other. So I don't think I have the right answer to tell you, okay, go for this one or the other. But if you tell me, just seeing this in the tier 1 Skip Lite make me feel that they want to use Skip.tools for long-term solution. Anyway, I think the best way is just asking directly the creators of these tools that we can see here about. Yeah, those guys, Mark and Abe. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your names correctly. You can follow them on Twitter. I will leave the links in the description as well. But yeah, I think you get the idea. If you want to start, just make sure or be aware that this is not a free tool, and you need to pick, at the end of the trial, you need to pick one of the tiers for your business. Okay, now let's back to the work. Before moving on, there is one more step you should do, and this is optional if you're using a Skip Lite. However, I recommend you anyway, which is installing the Swift compiler that supports the Android compilation. You should follow this Skip Android SDK install. This will install this custom Swift compiler capable to compile your code on Android as well. Once you're ready, you should use this Swift SDK list, and it should show you the custom version that you just installed. In this case, is Swift 6.1 release Android. Lastly, if you're using Skip.tools, you should use Skip checkup native. This will check if your dependencies for Skip.tools are ready to go. Let's see that.
One eternity later.
In my case, I got another problem, which is that for some reason my iOS emulators were gone. So I had to reinstall them and see if this finally fixed the problem. By the way, when I said that I had to reinstall the iOS emulators, I meant also to reinstall Xcode 16.4, because I was using Xcode 26, which is a beta at the moment I'm recording this, and I prefer to use a more stable Xcode release. If you want to follow me on this, I will recommend you to use a formal release, not a beta, just in case. And as you can see, finally it is working. Okay, after all this preparation, we're finally ready to jump into the code. Let's get to that. Okay, it's finally time to create a new project. How can I do it? You will have to use this command, skip init, that will initialize the process, open Xcode, that is an optional command that will open Xcode once the initialization and configuration of your project is finished. Here we have this native app. Native app is the configuration you want to use if the plan is to use the custom Swift compiler, and Skip.tools for the small and professional pricing. However, if you want to use Skip Lite for indies, your option will be Transpiled app. Remember, Transpile is converting your Swift code into Kotlin and then it's compiled, and native app is compiling your Swift code directly into Android. For this particular demo, I'm going to use Transpile app. However, I will show you at the end the same app with the configuration for native app, but you will see the difference in a bit. Of course, we have also the app ID that it's straightforward to understand. App name, in this case, let's say Hello World Skip. The project name that will hold all the files and configuration of your project, let me call it Hello World Skip. And finally, the app name, which is self-explanatory. I will call it as well Hello World Skip. I'm gonna press, and the magic will start happening. There you go. The project is ready. Before exploring the project, let me just tell you one thing. Here is the Hello World Skip project. If you click on it, you will see a couple of folders and files. For example, you have the configuration for Android that we will explore in a bit. You have this folder for Darwin, which is related to iOS. And what I want to show you right now is here is the Xcode project file. In case you didn't use the open Xcode command, you have to click on this one manually. Okay, now going back to the project, let me go in detail about this configuration. The project was created using packages. Android, Darwin, sources, all of these are packages and are distributed in a way that you can modularize your application. So the first one here is just an explanation of basic things like how to run it, how to test it, etc. You can read it later. We have here Skip.env that is basically configuration of your project. So this is working together with your info police for a few things. The interesting part is that we have the product name, the bundle identifier for iOS, but also we have the Android package name. I'm not super familiar with Android, to be honest, but here you can see that we can share configuration between both applications, which is great. Here in Hello World Skip, we have some different configurations. For example, we have skip action.launch. This is basically telling the compiler to run iOS and Android at the same time. However, if for some reason you don't need to run both and you're testing something for iOS, for example, you can use build. Build will just build your app for Android, but it won't run it. It will just run on iOS. And if you don't want to care of Android for any reason, you can use skip none. In this demo, I will just keep it launch. And we have more configuration about the app icons and more stuff. So the minimum deployment target for iOS configuration, macOS, and the version of Swift we want to use. For me, not complicating things right now, I'm gonna set this to Swift 5. But I know I should start using Swift 6, but I will tell you why I'm not doing that in just a bit. Localizable is that providing a string catalogs by default, which is convenient. And here is the package configuration that requires the dependencies. In this case, we are using a Skip and Skip UI. And one important thing here is that I use the transpiled app configuration. If I'm using native app, here I will have more dependencies like Skip.tools and other things that we're going to see in a bit. But just keep in mind that if you want to change the configuration or adding dependencies here, this is the place to go. And we want to talk a little bit more about dependencies in a bit as well. And now we have the Android folder. Here we have multiple things related to Android, of course. But the thing is that we have Kotlin configuration here. And I want to explain you a little bit of what's going on with this code. In simple terms, there is some default configuration related to this, where is it? Sorry, right here. Right here we have a main configuration that it's translated to Kotlin. Whatever code we are doing here, it will be translated into Kotlin, and this will be compiled independently. Well, here we have more Android configuration that I prefer not exploring right now. Fastlane, if also you want to set it up with more details. The Gradle, which is the dependency manager for Android. Later, we have this Darwin folder, which again, it's more related about iOS. So here we have a lot of configuration created by default for this demo app. But okay, I don't think it's important to explore it now. But here, sources. As I said, this is the entry point of the app. As you can see, yes, we are using SwiftUI for this app. And the SwiftUI code will be translated into Kotlin code and will be executed on Android. And here we have the source file that contains the actual code base shared across Android and iOS. Here we have a key configuration, which is skip mode. As I said, I'm using transpiled, but if you want to change this to native, you can do it. However, as I said, the dependencies will be different and you will have to do that manually. And one of the things that I read in the Skip documentation is that it's not so easy to move from one configuration to another. And even worse, it's not easy to convert a default project in iOS into Skip. Basically, the suggestions are just copying files one by one and creating a new project. But let's discuss that in a moment. Okay, here we have the code base of this demo. I'm not going to explain everything here, but the thing is that we have a top bar in this content view, and this content view is called in this particular hello world skip root view. We have a view model, and just keep in mind that we are using an observable object. That is a pretty common pattern in SwiftUI, and we are using observation. So you can see we are not doing anything or importing anything related to Kotlin or Skip yet. So this is purely Swift code that can run in a default SwiftUI application without a problem. Same here, we are not doing anything particular weird. Of course, we are logging, so the app cycle in the system. Okay, now let's go here. Okay, we have test. Let's see. We have a few tests. Are we using XCTest? Yes, of course. We are using the legacy framework. And we have a few more default configuration here that you can explore later. Let's go back to the main, because the interesting part is here. And as you can see, we are not providing any new framework or something that should be hard to remember. We're using just SwiftUI code for most of the things that we're gonna see in this application. Here in this configuration, we are just having an identifier of app root view, which is the custom root view created, some type values for the app delegate, and that's it. It's a pretty basic application. But anyway, I think it's time to run the application. Let me select iPhone 16 Pro and let me bring back the Android simulator. Okay, I'm going to select here, import virtual device. There you go. We're gonna start using Pixel 9. Okay, there you go. I'm gonna make room for this here and here. And I'm going to bring this here. There you go. And let's now see the result. While the app is compiling, I think it's a great time to smash that like button and subscribe to Swift and Tips because it's free and it's good for you. Okay, that took a while for some reason, but here we have the hello world from Skip running in iOS and Android. So you can see here we have the tabs, and we have also the same tabs on Android. Although the UI is slightly different, but you got the idea. So we can, for example, remove this. There we go. And we can do the same, I guess. There we go. Yeah. And we can type something. hello. Okay. Whatever thing is this. Hello. Toggles. Dates. Like that. And there we go. We can do the same as well here. Hello. Favorite. Dates, of course, are a little bit different here. As you notice, we have the time and date in different places. There we go. And okay, let's see. Looks like we have also, let me see if I'm not wrong. Sorry, let me go here. What was that? There we go, here. We have app storage, so it means that if I run this again, it's also supporting persistency. Let's see that. Let's stop it and let's run again. As you can see, the app is opening in the same state that I left before, which is another proof that we are using SwiftUI APIs and we have some equivalents into Android. If you're wondering, yes, the SwiftUI code is translated into Jetpack Compose, for those that need to know that. Okay, that's cool. Now, let me do one thing. I'm gonna close this emulator, and now I will try to run the app and see what happens. Remember that I said that you should have the Android emulator open? Well, this is what happens. You will get an error saying that not content either devices or emulator were reported. So probably there's a way to invoke it right away, unless by default you should keep it open manually. I wanted to show you this because I think this error message could be good enough because there are others that have no explanation of what's going on, or maybe the resolution is totally different from the error reported. Now, what's next? I don't want to start coding an app from scratch here because believe me, it sounds easy, but at the end, your app will contain a lot of configuration, a lot of a specific code for iOS that needs to be translated into something compatible with Android. And the reality is that it's not straightforward. For that, I have created my own application just to save time. But I will show you some things that are a little bit tricky to find. For those that follow me, you might remember that I've created an application to demonstrate the TCA capabilities. TCA is the composable architecture. And I also created the same application but using the MV pattern. If you don't know what is MV, basically it's not using TCA or any other dependencies, just purely SwiftUI code. So I said, why not recreating this application? Will that be possible? Of course, I'm not including TCA here because again, that is a dependency and I will tell you more about the dependencies in a bit. Let me go back here and I'm going to open another project. In this case will be online store skip. I think it's this one. This project is also using transpiled configuration. As you can see here, I have way more code than before. And let me just quickly see what I did and the main configuration. Okay, the entry point is this. Let me go back here. Okay, I'm using this root view. I have my own custom root view here that again, I'm not going to explain in detail. You can read the GitHub page in the description. But my point will be just running this into this configuration. iPhone 16 Pro. And let's see what will be the result. Oh, what's going on? Okay, I will have to open it from the file. I don't know what is going on, but anyway, let me try this one. Oh, okay, yeah, I think I opened the package and not the actual project. Okay, here we are again. Yeah, the same files. Now let me select iPhone 16 Pro and we are good to go. Let's click on it. Okay, it's loading on Android and on iOS. Nice. Okay, so list that is loading data. There you go. We can select items and send into the cart. We can go here to the profile. That is pretty basic. And okay, there you go. Those are the items. Now let's see this. We can click on it. There you go. We can do the same here. We can see the profile. Okay, it's right there. Go to cart, and there you go. Okay, the difference is the amount of money because I'm selecting more quantity here. But let me see. Can I remove this guy? There you go. Okay, now it's complete. There is a little bit differentiation between the pay price and the model. Okay, it's a little bit different. You can close it. You can close it as well. You can reopen it. There you go. Let me see. Can I buy this? Confirm your purchase. Yes. Oh, something happened. Okay. I don't know what's going on, but we don't need to know that. Okay. For some reason, here is failing. Welcome to the world of hybrid applications. Okay, anyway. So, but you got the idea. The app is running. The app is performing, is showing a list, is selecting data, is showing tabs. Although you might say that is pretty similar to iOS, but I'm happy for that because probably 99% of hybrid applications running on Android and iOS. In iOS, we have to suffer that apps look identical to Android apps, not respecting the human guideline interface. You can see that this application is not a hello world, but also is not a super large application that you can use as reference. But I mean, the point is that most of the capabilities here are working. Now, let me give you a few insights of what I learned making this application. Let me see if I can get a few errors that I found. Okay, let me see. Let me remove this. For example, one of the errors that I got is that you cannot use the plus operator for combining multiple texts, which is not a big deal, but let's see what happens if you try to do this. Let's try to compile the app. Yep. Now, you will see this on result reference. None of the candidates is applicable. But this error may be a little bit tricky. But what's going on here? Well, the problem is that this error is coming from Kotlin, actually. So if you go here, this is because this compose object is not manageable by Kotlin. That's basically a problem. And that's why I told you that some errors are a little bit cryptic or not super descriptive for what they want to provide you. This is one of them, but I think you get the idea. So what in this case I had to do is just, combine the text into one single text object. It's not a big deal. Now let's go to this. What is this? Oh, okay, this is not an error. This is just part of my application. Okay, here's a good one. So let me bring this. And there are many things that won't be available. Okay, let me just fix this because the names are not what this thing is expecting. What I want to show you is this error. Yeah, this API is not yet available. And this is another thing you will have to deal. You need to wait that the Skip is migrating or making something compatible with Android. In this case, File Manager is just one of many examples that are not available for your application in Android. Of course, you can follow the recommendation. You can go to GitHub, Skip.tools, and you can post your suggestion here to make this compatible or see the status of this. That's a good start. But if you in this case want to use File Manager, you cannot do it. However, what will happen if this is not available? Well, what you can do is using this compiler directive, that is skip. This skip is telling if skip is available, do this, right? But in this case, we want the other way around. We want not skip. And then if we try to compile this, we will see that the error is gone, and we will be able to compile this without problem because it's not taking care, there you go, build success. It's not taking care of this file manager in this case. However, what will happen if we cannot leave the app without functionality? In this case, if we want to log into a file, well, we need that for both applications. You will have to find a way to do it. You can also create some Kotlin code to make an equivalent into Kotlin. However, I'm not going to do that right now because I don't have time. I don't want to make this longer than it is now, but there are some workarounds. That is just what I want to say. Now, let me see what other errors I got. Oh, I found another. For example, this one is not available in Skip. If I remove this as well, you will see the same problem. Yep, this app is not available, so consider filing your library. Another thing that I had to do in this particular demo is combining different components because, for example, the safe area is not available. If you try to execute it, it will tell you that the API is not available. So I had to split my work into two. One with a list and a safe area inset, and another, where is it? Another with the list, but also a VStack and including a button. I know, and you saw this already. I know it's not efficient and it's not equivalent, but I mean, it's a workaround, again, for showing what I want in the app. Same, for example, with content unavailable. There are many things about it. And here is an interesting one. You can see here that I'm splitting the work into Android and not Android. Why? Well, let me bring this, which is the original implementation I had for this particular computer property. What could be wrong with this small expression? This is the problem. Since that in this configuration, transpiling your code to Kotlin, you should respect what Kotlin is expecting. In this case, this operator is not applicable between doubles and ints. In Swift can understand that if you're comparing this double value, the 0 here, it's a double as well, but not in Kotlin for some reason. Okay, so this little thing should work as double in both sides of the operator, and it's working. I know here it's a little bit redundant to do this, but it's just to give you the idea. Along with the APIs, you need to also respect the compatibility with Kotlin. And this might be just a small problem, but I don't know what other kind of problems you might face in your own. So just keep that in mind. Okay, at this point, I can just keep going and on, but I think you got the point. One of the concerns with this kind of approaches is that APIs are not available in both ways, and you should understand that the code compiled should work in both platforms. If not, you will get errors like you saw earlier. Now, let me show you one more thing with this code, but instead of using the transpiled app configuration, we will use the native configuration. For that, give me 1 second. I'm gonna bring this here. I'm going to use this guy here. And basically, if I'm not wrong, let me see. Yeah, this is the same project, the same file configuration. Let me, oops, not this. Yep. We're using exactly the same, but as you can see, we have more dependencies this time. This is because this is the native configuration. This code, instead of being translated into Kotlin, it will be compiled directly in Swift and translated into Android in just one step. It sounds easy, but of course there are a lot of things happening in the compiler under the hood, but you got the point. Now let me see if this will work. I don't fully remember. Let me run this and find out. Oh, I'm gonna use iOS 18. Okay, it took a while again, but you can see that both apps are compiling and running. However, you're seeing now that iOS is working as expected, but for some reason, the Android app is not loading. Why? Why is that happening? Even though it's working, there you go. Did you notice that it's now loading? Okay. This is expected because I made something on purpose. If you go here, one of the biggest difference is that in some piece of code, I had to also add skip views. Where is it? There you go. This skip views UI, or in this particular, this one is library that it's allowing a bridging between Swift and Android. And if you don't import this, for example, let me do it here. Yeah, I got a bunch of errors and not even pointed out where is the error. Your session, whatever, is not a member, is not basically detecting the framework. Although your session is compatible because it's one of the main dependencies for networking, it's not working. So after many exploration, and you can thank me with a like for this, well, it's just a matter of importing skip views in your models and other areas that might require this to keep this compatibility, this bridging between Swift and Android requirements. This is similar to what you should expect with Swift and Objective-C equivalent, where some APIs are not available and you need to do some bridging in the middle to make them compatible. It's something like that, but happening under the hood. So if I run this again, if I try to just compile this again, you will see that this should work. But it's taking a lot.
2,000 years later.
There you go, it's working. Now, let me go here because you might notice a warning. It says this file contains observables, but they will not be able to power your Android UI unless you import skip views or skip views UI. In this case, this is another example of what you have to do. If you're using observables, it's not compatible, let's call it. It will run, but your objects will be ignored. That's the problem that you saw at the beginning. The loading spinner is there, but it's not changing the state because there's nothing being observed, because Android doesn't even have an idea how to translate this. So the solution is straightforward here. Instead of, we're going to use skip views because we are talking about the UI observables. And now run the application and see what you got in Android. And as you can see, it's working. Yeah, at the first time. Magic, right? Well, those kind of things you'll have to deal if you're using Skip. I don't have any complaints with Skip. It's pretty good in terms of what you can see with working in Swift and making an app for iOS and Android. But when you are using a new framework or a recent framework, there are many things that you would face on the road that are not obvious when you're watching a demo tutorial or something like that. So that's why I try to show you as much error as possible or gotchas. And well, overall, everything it keeps the same. Let me just go to the example that I saw you before here. Here I have the code that I mentioned you that should be compatible with Kotlin in the previous example. Let me just get this one. Oops, sorry. Stop. Yep. Let me now compile this and see what happened. It's working. Yes. This is one of the biggest difference with transpiling versus using native app, meaning that Swift, the custom Swift compiler making your app for Android, is capable to deal with this because you're not translating this into Kotlin code, so you don't have to respect Kotlin at all. It's just Swift code. But if you're using Skip Lite, you have to take care of Kotlin rules and Swift rules, which might introduce several problems to you. What kind of other problems? I don't know. You will have to find out. But here, that's why I think this is more for a long-term solution. Skip.tools providing this custom compiler because it's just literally one code base and not one code and then a translation of that code. Keep that in mind for your future. I wanted to just give you one more thing here. You are seeing this error that I introduced by myself. One of the problems and limitations is that the bridging with Android is not compatible with private properties. So you have to expose your properties internally at least. What will happen if I try to do this? Private. Even though I don't need, for example, show confirmation alert to be exposed outside of this view, I can't because the framework is forcing me to making it internal. This is breaking a little bit the encapsulation. It may be a deal for you or not. I don't know. I just wanted to put things in perspective that this is another trade-off that you have to deal with it. And the rest for API compatibility is the same. If your API is not supported because it's iOS specific, you will have to find out another source for your Android code. You can keep using Kotlin if it's what you want, but again, this is another unknown that you might face in your development. Now, what about the dependencies that we talked earlier? Let me go here. And this page, swifteverywhere.org, is compiling the list of the most common dependencies, libraries that we use in Swift. As you can see now, the Android build status is 62%, meaning that a little bit more than the half of the common libraries are good to go with Android. What does it mean? For example, Alamo Fire is good to go in your project if you want to use it on Android and iOS using Skip. But the problem, for example, if for some reason you live in the Stone Age and you want to use RX Swift, you cannot do it. You'll have to work around with it. Although, again, in this particular case, is not a big deal if you're starting a brand new project. For example, SwiftLint is a problem because it's really useful library to check all the syntax and some guidelines in your code base and on and on. You will see a lot of those already supported, but many, basically the half, that are still in progress for that. Now, one question that you may have is this compatible with TCA? Well, if we look at the page, let's see, composable. We have reactive Swift composable architecture that is not supported, but that's not what we want. And we have another thing, composable deep link, but not the Swift composable architecture. And I did my homework and I tried to investigate this. I tried to replicate the project using Swift composable architecture from version 120. Unfortunately, well, first off, this is working without any problem running on iOS. As I said, if you invoke skip action equal to none, it won't compile the app on Android. But if you try to do it on launch or build, this won't work because the Android compatibility is not ready yet. What is the problem? Well, you will see that, and I can share more on this in the description below. But basically, this is one response from Mark, who is one of the authors of Skip.tools. Basically, he's saying that TCA is working on this compatibility. Actually, it looks like the version 2.0 will be that compatibility with Android or cross-platform in general. Unfortunately, it is not ready yet. And if you plan to use this TCA library in your application, I'm sorry, but it's not possible unless in July 2025. One of the key pieces that Mark shared is that if you want to make a library compatible with Android, basically 99% of the work is make it compatible with Linux. And if you do that, then you will be good to go. However, there is one more thing you should know, is that if you actually want to translate a library to be compatible, you can do it manually using this approach with compile directives telling that if you can, for example, in this case, DCA is not compatible because it's heavily using Combine, and Combine is an iOS framework and it's not any equivalent in Android. But what we can do is trying to use Open Combine, which looks like it's a cross-platform version of Combine. In that case, we can just selecting what is the version we want to use. In this case, if we can import Combine, we want to use Combine directly. Otherwise, we want to use Open Combine. This is a pretty specific example because there is someone that made a cross-platform Combine version. But in other cases, that won't be possible. And you will have to deal with either trying to patch or fork a custom library and do it yourself, which is something that I don't fully recommend because there are a lot of cases that you might need to be aware of it. And most importantly, it will be a lot of work besides of your business logic. And I think it's good to keep your business untouched. Now, there are more documentation about it if you are interested. I think it's something that we might explore in a future video if you want. So let me know in the comments, please. But yeah, you get the idea. There are multiple, some support for doing that, even if it's something specific for iOS. Well, we can try to switch between Android support and iOS support. However, just keep in mind that if your plan is to use something really iOS specific, let's say Apple CarPlay or HealthKit, of course, what is the point of making an app on Android? So just choose your requirements and see if this kind of approach with Skip is a good fit for you. One more thing, for example, core data support or any other kind of support or database support. Unless from what I got, it turns out that there is an Skip.SQL, a dedicated version that supports on Skip platform, but looks like core data, of course, is not supported because it's iOS specific. And well, you will have to either use this Skip.SQL or maybe trying to mix some iOS approach with Android approach. But that maybe will bring even more problems than solutions. I don't know. It's up to you. I just wanted to give you the heads up of a little bit what's going on. We can talk more about other kind of libraries and support, but unless I think you got enough idea of what you need to face with these hybrid approaches. And now your turn. Tell me, what do you think about the Skip framework and all this work on Android? Let me know in the comments below. I will be really happy to read your comments. Lastly, what I think about all of this. Overall, I think it's pretty amazing to see Swift code running in both platforms, iOS and Android. It's the first stone of many great things coming up in Swift. And Skip is being the pioneer of this. I think the future will be great. However, my recommendation here is that if you're using a framework that is kind of new, you have to deal with a lot of surprises and you will be the early adopter telling others what to avoid and what they should do instead. That is the risk that it comes with that. However, if you don't have so many risks, if you want to explore how to make an app with Swift for both iOS and Android, I think Skip is a great tool. Just keep in mind that it's not a free tool, and please read the terms and conditions. But overall, I feel it is just the beginning. It's this from this and just improving over time. And right now in July 2025, those are my impressions. Just be careful. But maybe in a couple of years, it will be a great tool, and who knows, maybe without Apple announcement supporting officially Android, probably Xcode will just be a click of you want to compile it for iOS or Android. I don't know. Just the time will tell us the truth. If you want to learn more about Skip, I left a lot of links in the description. Please read them because it's really gold information. And if you want me to talk about the specific topics of Skip, let me know as well in the comments. And please thank you for supporting my channel because those kind of videos are really hard to do. Well, that's all I got. Remember, my name is Pete and this is Fun Tips. Thanks for watching and have a great day.